This is the watchman giving a clarion call. In my last video, I explained the very violent and bitter history between some Western banks and the Eastern countries they fought against. Those bankers invaded and fought India and China because they needed their vast silver reserves to maintain their monetary power. I laid out the case of why silver revenge by China would be very appropriate, and today I'm going to show our community that the Chinese government is not only very aware of how deadly silver is to their enemies, but how silver could be a two-edged sword that damages them as well if they use it too early. Now, why would I say that? Well, because China is just so large in both population and wealth, and silver so ridiculously tiny, that the slightest wrong move into silver could roil global markets. China is a mega power, and as such, it's difficult to gain access to most markets without upsetting those markets, without spiking them, without tipping everyone else off. Think of gold as a backyard swimming pool. There's just a tiny bit of gold on Earth that all the world's sovereign funds, cash and treasury markets, money markets, and real estate markets can flow into. Hundreds of trillions of dollars in assets. And if you believe the official gold figures, there's only about $6 trillion in gold on Earth, and much of that isn't for sale at any price. Well, if gold's a swimming pool, then silver is literally a whiskey shot glass, perhaps even a thimble full of water. After all, there are only a few billion ounces of silver on Earth, valued at roughly $35 to $50 billion at these prices. There's so little silver that China has had to avoid it like the plague and even help with the silver market rigging. Now, China did that so they'd have time to acquire the gold first that they needed. That's why China has had to quietly prepare this silver trap in stages, very slowly and patiently. Now, let me walk you through the stages of China's movement towards silver and gold so you'll see what I mean. You may even want to rewatch this video later if you have to, because I'm going to move fast here and there's a lot to cover. Step 1. China took the enormous step of legalizing gold and silver ownership for its citizens again in 2003. Remember, before this time, really only Communist Party members had any access to limited gold, silver legal ownership that the state Chinese mints made. Silver ownership had especially been made illegal by Beijing since 1935 due to the war on silver by the bankers. Step 2. Just a few short years later, around 2008-2009, the Chinese government began actively promoting gold and silver ownership for their citizens. That's a historic turning by the government of China on precious metals. In 6 years, they went from outlawing it to actually encouraging their citizens to buy it. It's utterly mind-blowing. Step 3. China actively upgraded their state mints located in places like Shenzhen, Shanghai, and Shenyang to crank out more silver panda coins. Now, most folks don't know this, but when they first started making silver pandas in the 80s, they were only striking about 100,000 coins per year, and most of them were for foreigners. But then again, after legalization, they bumped the number of coins to 600,000 per year overnight. And then again in 2010, they bumped it again to 1.5 million. And then yet again in 2012, they bumped it to 8 million coins per year. Now, I expect soon, when the time is right, Beijing will order the total capacity be bumped again to perhaps 30 to 40 million in order to compete with the US Mint. So you see from the beginning, they've been running a marathon with silver, not a sprint, carefully taking each step only as they were ready. And get this, the 2016 Silver Panda, for the very first time, does not bear the stamp 1 troy ounce on it. Instead, new silver pandas say 30 grams on them. Very interesting. This is huge. This means that China won't just control the gold and silver flow or even its pricing. They'll also dictate what weights they're considered and measured in henceforth. This is further proof they intend to push the world away from the troy ounce measurements and denominate coins and bars in grams and kilos. Step number 4. They went after their enemy's power in gold. Now, the bankers in London and New York for centuries have had exchanges which dominated the trade and purchasing of gold and silver. So Beijing wisely realized that it wasn't simply that these bankers had gold, but that they controlled the levers of pricing around gold through highly sophisticated exchanges. So Beijing established their own highly regulated, officially sanctioned gold and silver exchange, the Shanghai Gold Exchange, or the SGE. It's been responsible now for removing over 10,000 tons of gold from world supply and moving it into Chinese borders. It's a highly trusted, highly transparent, and universally respected exchange in its business practices. The SGE, not London or New York, is now where the global physical game is happening. The COMEX, are you kidding me? Those clowns are a laughing stock. They only physically deliver like 50 tons a year. Shanghai moves that much around in 1 week. Enough physical gold has been drained that now step 5 was possible. China, who'd been pulling the banking dragon's golden teeth from its mouth, now made their boldest move yet. Always remember this: if someone has enough gold to back their currency, they're powerful indeed. But if they have the means at their disposal to price it for everyone else, they're in a league of their own. London has been able to control gold because they've been able to price it. The London fix was simply the price at which major gold buying and selling parties would be quoted each day, and it really was the first mechanism of direct price control, and they were unchallenged in doing this. Until 2 months ago, when China finally launched their own gold fix and did so with a yuan-denominated gold kilo futures contract. This is huge. Now, China can put its own counterweight against London and New York City on the price of gold. And when the time is right, they'll set gold free to find its true value, and not before. So those are the steps which have prepared the silver trap. They've taken out the enemy's gold, their exchange domination, and paired it with a gold fix priced in Chinese currency. Now the time is now perfect for China to use the silver they've acquired on the sly, and believe me, they've acquired it, to take vengeance upon their foes. And folks, it's not just the huge 70 million ounce surge of buying we saw in Shanghai that I'm talking about. Remember this: Ted Butler has always maintained that if you could look into JP Morgan's books on the short side, you'd see lots and lots of Chinese names in that book. He also believes JP Morgan has amassed up to 500 million physical ounces of physical silver since 2011. Folks, who do you think they've been doing this for? Now, several people like Bill Holter, for instance, have suggested that China loaned several 100 million ounces of silver to the U.S. back in the 90s to keep the rigging of silver going longer at that time. It's highly likely that if this is true, it would add serious clout to the notion that J.P. Morgan isn't simply an arm of the Fed or D.C. anymore, but also of China itself. This new silver surge in Shanghai means that in 1 year, China has gone from exporting 100 million ounces of silver a year to importing 100 million ounces a year. That's a 200 million ounce swing. Incredible. And now that China's acquired the gold, acquired the old JP Morgan building and vault in downtown Manhattan, and set up its mechanisms to wrest away pricing power, all that's really left is to exert the smallest pressure on the already strained, busting at the seams silver market, and extract their vengeance for the crimes perpetrated on China and India at any time they see fit. The Watchmen, I don't know about all this. This is very interesting, Watchmen, but the Opium Wars were like 150 years ago. Don't you think they've moved on by now? Now, they're not interested in revenge. They're our business partners. They just want to use us to make more money. Okay, if you think that, you have absolutely no idea who the Chinese are or how they think at all. And I'm going to demonstrate that to you right now in a way that you'll never forget by wrapping this clarion call up with a tragic story that occurred during the Opium Wars. And it was brought to mind by a shield brother in Singapore. At the pinnacle of wealth in China, when silver literally flowed like water through the streets, their emperor built a magnificent palace called the Old Summer Palace. This palace was unparalleled in beauty and its scale was unbelievable. Now, as the French and British soldiers were marching toward Beijing in that war, they sent envoys to China's Prince Yi under a flag of truce. All the while, British and French soldiers were sent to loot that palace. And upon hearing this, Prince Yi of the Qing dynasty killed their envoys. He was so angry, and in turn, the British High Commissioner was so enraged, he ordered the entire summer palace be destroyed in retaliation. All of it. That palace was so vast that even with literal armies of French and British soldiers all burning, smashing, and looting, it still took 2 whole days to destroy that palace. To this very day, virtually all of it still lies in ruins. And many have wondered, why hasn't the Chinese government restored this beautiful palace 150 years later? Beijing pretends the reason they don't rebuild it is that they simply don't have the blueprints for it. But everyone there knows that's a lie. They have incredibly detailed plans of this palace. No, it's widely understood that the true reason there in Beijing that they never rebuilt the old summer palace is that they wanted each new generation of China to see this great pride of their heritage still broken in pieces on the ground. They want their people to remember the extent of the cruelty they received and feel the fresh sting of humiliation as if it were yesterday, so that when the time finally comes for vengeance, the people will gladly cry out for it. Now, brothers, would it not be poetic justice if when the blow of vengeance is finally dealt, that it be made with a dagger of pure silver? Now, I would not be surprised in the least if that's exactly what occurs and soon. This is the Watchman signing off. Stay vigilant and bring the fight to them.